The shots ring out day and night, and the innocence of everyday life is shattered. Violence is taking aim at Hampton Roads, stopping us all in its deadly tracks.
2 against 1, you gotta do what you got to do. You know what I'm saying? I hope they get the who done it. If they don't, I will.
He just said, man, I told you I ain't got no more. I ain't got no more, man, don't shoot. And then it's bam, bam, bam.
2, maybe 3 shots. They were rapid shots.
Under the gun, violence in Hampton Roads.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Terry Zahn.
And I'm WAVY-TV, and welcome to our show tonight. During the next hour, we will examine the problem of gun violence here in Hampton Roads.
Although we really don't have the answers, we're hoping at least to get some of the questions out, perhaps even address the root of the problem, find out what we can do to make a difference.
We've invited a panel of guests to join us in the next hour, and they are Delegate Phil Hamilton from Newport News, Ron Hess, the owner of a gun shop in Norfolk, Dick Parise of Virginians Against Handgun Violence, gun store owner Sam Corey of Newport News.
The question is, where do we begin this discussion of guns and violence in our neighborhoods?
Well, how about with the accessibility of guns? As Doug Aronson reports, gun running is a lucrative business.
And loopholes in the law make the Commonwealth a common stop for criminals.
Earlier this month, our I-Team staffer walked into this Peninsula gun shop and came out with 2 .25 caliber Raven pistols. Our staffer proved she was a Virginia resident, was over 21, and had no felony convictions. A legal gun purchase done in 14 minutes. Gun runners are taking advantage of the Peninsula's gun laws, where no waiting period or permit is required. Many gun runners come from Washington, D.C. and New York City, drugs in cash in hand, and recruit so-called straw purchasers to make the buy on their behalf.
I talked to Sylvia, and I asked her could she do a favor for a friend of mine. She said, what kind of favor, Joe? I said, well, trying to maybe help them get a gun.
According to the feds, the best customers making straw purchases are crack addicts, welfare moms, and college students.
Someone, needs $200, needs $100, and if you can make it purchasing 4 or 5 guns, that's an easy $100.
30% of guns bought in Virginia end up in crimes in cities north of here. A bank robber took hostages outside Baltimore. Although she didn't know it at the time, Sylvia Wiggins bought his gun in Hampton. The feds frequently nail gun runners and straw purchasers, but apparently not as often as they'd like. They say chances are a gun running scheme is going down now. Doug Aronson, Wavy News 10.
Now, if you're curious about the trade value of a gun, take a look at this. According to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, a 9mm pistol, which retails for $250, can be traded for an ounce of crack for $1,000.
And a .380, which sells for about $80, is worth an ounce of cocaine or $500, while a .25 caliber that retails for $50 can be traded for half an ounce of crack or $500.
So how can we survive this recent epidemic of gun violence here in Hampton Roads?
Well, that's the question we want to put to our panel tonight and also to you.
So let's open up the phone lines. On the south side, you can give us a call at 399-7644. And on the peninsula, statewide and in North Carolina, that number is 1-800-339-3018.
We have many places that we can start tonight, but I think I would like to start with Ron Hess because he took issue with some of the figures that we had from the ATF, the numbers of how much the guns retail for and how much they could be traded for in crack and dollars. Ron, what's wrong with those figures?
I don't profess to be an expert in the value of the crack cocaine or any of the drugs or narcotics. I profess that some of the prices that they value their firearms at are incorrect. I don't sell any guns in my store for $50. I don't know any dealers that do. It just doesn't happen. You might find some used firearms in some stores for $50, but even the ones that your people have purchased cost more than $50. And if you go back and check your receipts, you'll find out they did. On the same hand, you'll find out that a multiple purchase had to be turned into alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. I'd like to know why they didn't trace and follow up on your idea when their 2 firearms were purchased and why they didn't pursue it.
Let me do a quick follow-up here, and I'll put this to Sam and also to Ron. There are people, the ATF and police up in the Northeast, that say a lot of guns are coming out of Virginia because they're easy to get, especially on the peninsula, Sam, where you don't need a permit. It's very easy to get. There's no waiting period. Is this a bum rap? Is that something you disagree with, or are you being singled out here unfairly?
No, I don't feel that way. I feel that I don't really feel that the public knows where the guns are really coming from. It's not just from gun dealers. The gun dealer, he is a legitimate business. He doesn't have to, he goes through this new background check, which we do have for the state. The state does make the decision as to whether we are to sell the gun or not sell the gun, and we all comply with that. But there's another segment in which I think should be recognized. To give you a for instance, there are 15,000 full-time stocking dealers in the nation. There's 7,200 licensees in the state of Virginia. Norfolk, for instance, you have 132 licensees in Norfolk, yet you have approximately seven stocking dealers, storefront dealers in Norfolk. It certainly doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up.
Okay.
We do have some callers on the line. Caller, your question, please.
Yes, I'd like to know, how do the gun dealers feel going to sleep at night when they know that kids are having guns put on the breakfast plate in the morning?
Gentlemen, Ron, you want to start with that?
I've never heard of anything so absurd. A person who has purchased a firearm, a legitimate purchase, goes through the permit system in the city of Norfolk, goes through the state call-in check, fills out a federal form. He's not going to allow that weapon, a legitimate firearm, to fall into the hands of a juvenile. You just don't do that. Registration of these firearms is done so completely that a person that has that legitimate firearm, not one that's stolen on the street, not one that's handled 3 or 4 times, not one that's been taken in a break-in, a burglary in the city. It just doesn't happen when they're handed out.
But if, say, you do a background check on someone who is an adult, someone who has no prior criminal record, they buy a gun and, of course, give it to a juvenile.
Would they give it to a juvenile? It's a felony.
And many times they do.
It's a felony. Let's prosecute those people and put them away. If they're going to violate the state and federal laws, let's put them in jail.
The problem, though, is that there are too many guns. I mean, we're quibbling about laws, rules that have some effect in one way or another, but the fact is that people are dying. Children are shooting each other in schools. We've got people out there with automatic weapons and semi-automatic weapons that are wiping out clusters of people. What's the difference if a gun costs $50 or $500? I talked to a man a couple of nights ago whose 20-year-old son was killed, shot and killed in college last September. It devastates. The boy is gone. All of his friends are flunking school. The family is devastated.
Dick,
what's the difference about these? We have to reduce the number of guns.
Let me ask you a quick question. I've talked to police who say most of the guns that are on the street, or a lot of them anyway, are guns that are stolen from legitimate owners. People who own guns, have permits, have registered them. They get stolen in break-ins and burglaries. How do you control something like that?
Well, the overall reduction of guns is an absolute necessity because people in this kind of an environment get the feeling that, gee, in order to protect myself, I better go out and buy a gun. Well, the statistics I know are dry and all the rest, but the indications are that the gun that is purchased for protection at home is used primarily for suicide. If you've got a teenager in the house, then you've got somebody who's on an emotional wingding all the time, and the gun is now the favorite form of suicide. If you've got little children, the chances of accidental death are enormous. If you've got parents who argue with each other, the papers are full of guys and shooting each other.
You're saying that because
when there's a gun available, whereas years ago the people had the same level of emotion, there was no gun available, and people got over this stuff. Now they don't.
They never got over it. They never got over it. They never got over the stuff. You cannot dictate the morals of our society. You cannot change the way that you want people to act.
Of course you can.
No, you can't. You never will be able to.
Okay, gentlemen, let's pause here for just a moment and go back to the phone
We
and
have,
take
we have
another
another caller. Caller, your question, please.
Caller, are you there? Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What's your
I
question?
think we should stop selling guns.
Is that all? That's your comment?
Yes.
Would that help anything?
Not at all.
Caller, what do you think? Why would that help something? He's gone. Okay.
Terry, I'd
Let's
like
get
to say
Delegate
something
Phil
with regards
Hamilton.
to what's been said. The problem can't be limited just to guns. This is much broader than just guns. We're talking about society that has had a diminishing in moral values. Where it used to be that people could get over these things, and because a gun is accessible, they now use it. That doesn't have anything to do with that piece of equipment that's right there. That has to do with a decay and the moral fabric of our country. And we can talk about guns and we can talk about this. These are merely symptoms of a much bigger problem facing our society. And until we get the courage to start addressing some of the real root causes of our societal problems, then whether it be guns or whether it be knives, we'll always find something else to inflict pain on someone else.
So are we talking about education or legislation here, or both?
Well, I think we've got to talk about it from a very comprehensive approach. I mean, it's got to involve education, but it can't just be government. It can't just be schools. It's got to be all the social agencies. It's got to be the churches. It's got to be the civic groups. It's got to be an entire community making a decision that we want to restore moral value to our society and establish some expectations and standards. And we've got to start addressing the root problems of violence in our society across the board.
Okay, let's try to go quickly back to the phone. We'll get around to everybody and have some more comments in just a moment. Let's try to get another call in now. Caller, go ahead. You're on the air.
Hi, I would like to say that we also need to look at the age limitation as far as crimes. I believe if you do the crime, regardless of the age, you should do the time. I think that plays a good part on gun control as well.
Ma'am, do you feel then that the sentences handed out are simply too lenient?
Oh, yes, I do. Yes,
what about,
I do.
let's ask our delegate about that. What do you think? Should the laws be tougher? Should we impose mandatory sentences for some of these crimes?
Well, I think that we have in the state legislature taken some measures to come up with stiffer penalties. And I think what she's talking about is the age of the child that's committing the crimes. And I think we have to realize as parents that we are responsible for our children until they're 18 years of age. Recent case in Newport News where a 9-year-old had a loaded .25 caliber in a school classroom. I mean, that gun belonged to those parents. We have to look and see, how did that child get access to that gun from that parent? And if the parent was not responsible in how they kept and stored that weapon, then maybe we need to look at some possible child neglect punishment against that individual.
So the parent should possibly be penalized if a child gets a gun and ends up killing someone.
At least with the fine that can be imposed with prosecution of such a crime.
Obviously, we cannot get rid of all the guns in our society.
And along with gun dealers and the military, the profession that relies on firearms most heavily is police work.
That's why police take handling of a gun on and off the job very seriously. We asked our Les Smith to get the police perspective on how to safely handle a gun.
Before new police recruits get to fire their first shot here on the police practice range, they have to spend 4 days here in the classroom. They are taught cardinal rules of gun safety. Treat every gun as if it were loaded. Never point the gun at anything you aren't willing to accept the responsibility for destroying. Your finger stays off the trigger until your sights are on the target. The average gun buyer doesn't have the benefit of extensive police training, but police recommend some safeguards for anyone who keeps a gun at home, including locking the weapon in the cabinet or placing a lock on the gun itself. Keep it unloaded and keep the bullets in a separate place.
You hear somebody trying to break in a house, you have to get up, unlock the cabinet, get the gun out, get the magazine, which you store in a separate area, insert it and load the weapon. By then you've got to be completely awake.
Sergeant Capps helped familiarize me with a 9mm.
You reach up with your left index finger and hit the slide release and let the slide go forward. All right, we just load it around into the chamber. Okay, the gun now is ready to fire except for the safety still on.
But on my first shot, I made a careless mistake. I pulled the gun back toward me, just the way I've seen it done countless times on television and in the movies. It is a mistake that can be fatal.
Several years ago, they had a SWAT officer kill his partner because he's behind him with his gun in this position, and the partner was in front of him, and he shot him in the head when something jolted him.
Most gun buyers can't get the experience handling guns police get, but they can benefit from what's taught here, that firearm safety lies between the ears, not in the hands.
When we continue, havens of hope turning into battlegrounds.
Guns in our schools. How big a problem is it here in Hampton Roads? We'll take a look.
It was a frigid February Friday morning when shots rang out in the parking lot of Booker T. Washington High School. One man died instantly. Hours later, another man died. Inside, a normal school day came to an abrupt end. But does a normal school day still exist? Students are looking for answers to questions that are hard to answer.
They're just now able to get the metal detectors in schools. Why is it just now and not 5 years ago?
But the problem is not isolated to the south side. This year on the peninsula, 23 firearms have been confiscated in Hampton and Newport News schools. And just last week, shock, terror, anger swept through the city of Newport News when 2 elementary school students brought guns to their classrooms.
And although no one was injured, the incidents frightened parents and the children.
A few 5th graders from the city's East End and Denby shared their feelings with Peninsula reporter Monique Braxton.
When I hear about on the news and people bringing guns to school, I just, get scared, kind of, because it might come to our school.
The fear expressed by these 5th graders at Yates Elementary is not their vivid imagination. It's a reality, a parent's worst nightmare, played out in schoolyards across the nation, leaving them afraid to come to school.
That maybe one of the children at our school might get shot.
They're very harmful and they can hurt you.
They're concerned about their friends because a loaded revolver was placed in a backpack and taken to South Morrison last Wednesday. The next morning, an unloaded 12-gauge flare gun surfaced at Greenwood Elementary.
They just want to fit along with their friends and be cool, and so then they carry them around.
And while admitting the fascination with danger exists, these kids also blame parents for putting them in harm's way.
Parents could hide guns in places that kids can't find them and can't reach them, so you won't bring them to school and harm kids.
Parents should talk to their kids and tell them that guns are dangerous, and
that if they bring them to school that they should get a lot of punishment.
And out of the mouths of babes comes advice for pistol-packing peers and gun control advocates.
We should never touch guns or even go near a gun because it can accidentally, even if you drop it, go off and shoot somebody.
All the guns in the U.S. except for the military and stuff like that, they could send those guns to a different country or something.
On the peninsula, Monique Braxton, WAVY News 10.
Now, most cities in Hampton Roads expel students who bring weapons to school.
And the governor has also signed a bill making it a felony to take a loaded gun on school property. The offense carries a fine of $2,500 and a prison term of up to 5 years.
So let's start there. Now, joining our group now are Delegate Billy Robinson and Ron Hess, who is also a Norfolk gun dealer. We might add, too, that we invited a member of the NRA. There are some members of the NRA in our studio audience, which you'll get a chance to speak with them as well. We'll address this first question to Delegate Billy Robinson, who introduced the bill we just spoke of. Will this new law work?
Well, let me correct the record. That was Phil Hamilton's bill, I do believe. But I voted for it, supported it, because I thought that it was at least a step to try to get the message to students, to parents, to those who might be arming children, that there's a very separate and distinct and significant offense to be imposed, or penalty to be imposed, if a child, or anyone for that matter, takes a firearm on school property. That's the message the General Assembly is trying to send, that we recognize this as a particularly dangerous type of situation.
Our phones are already lighting up. It seems like we already have some questions for you. Caller, your question, please.
Yes, I'd like to make a statement. I think that the laws should be tougher than what they are now, and that no one should be able to purchase a gun unless their job occupation requires them to have one.
So he's saying that the law should be tougher. Do you agree?
Well, what he's saying is that people shouldn't be able to buy a gun. I don't agree with that. I think that we have to deal effectively with the means of preventing those who constitute the lawless element from getting guns or using guns to profiteer in their illegal activities. But I don't think that law-abiding citizens ought to be prohibited from purchasing and owning firearms.
Let's go back to the phone, take another call. Caller, go ahead, you're on the air.
Yes, I'd like to know what is being done legislatively about making the laws tougher, if anything. And I'd also like to say that the problem starts within, especially within the inner city. I've had a lot of friends in the past couple of months this year die from guns, and it's just ridiculous. I don't understand why, this is going on, and everyone keeps saying that we should do this and that, but no one's coming up with any solutions. I mean, personally, I don't see a solution, but and I haven't heard any good ideas so far either. So I want to know what is being done legislatively to stop all of this and to stop the sale of these guns.
Well, let's start with our two delegates. Phil, why don't you start, and then Billy?
Legislatively, I think we are trying to address the problem of guns on school property with tougher penalties. Prior to this year, it was just a Class 1 misdemeanor for bringing a firearm onto school property. Now it's a Class 6 felony for doing so, and if you happen to discharge that firearm on the property, then it's a Class 4 felony. But that's not the only way to start to address the problem, and I would agree that it's going to take more than just laws that toughen penalties. We're talking about an attitudinal change among society, as I stated earlier, and it's not just going to be legislation that's going to start to solve this problem. It's going to have to be a commitment from the community to start to address it in realistic manners.
Billy, anything to add?
Well, something Phil said earlier on part of the earlier segment, and that is you're still dealing with the symptoms, the fallout of the problem. You have widespread unemployment, and the group that I think is really being targeted right now is that young age group, say between 14 and 20. Those youngsters, particularly in the inner city, have no self-esteem, they don't see any future, and so they live for today. Whether they die as a result of a bullet or some other cause, they don't see their future. And for them, there is no future. And what we've got to do is to begin to deal, I think, as Phil indicated earlier, with the problems that cause these youngsters to feel that they have no future. And unless we do that, we're not going to really make a significant difference in terms of gun violence.
Let's bring Dick and Ron into this, too. Dick, go ahead.
Well, one of the considerations that you have to make is what's happening in other countries. You had a fellow from Poland, Greg, here for a while with you. This enormous emotional pressure in Poland, in East Germany, in countries around the world that don't have the gun deaths that we have. The kids that we have in this country, sure, they have pressures. In inner city kids have pressures, but if you look around the world, in Africa, in Europe, in Asia, lots of people have tremendous pressures. They're under there's starvation, there's all kinds of stuff going on. But you don't have the killing. The thing that makes the difference is the gun. It's not that people are different emotionally anywhere, that we have to have a second coming and change the way we think and the way we live. We have to get rid of this instrument that makes it so easy for a person to kill someone.
Ron,
in a state of anger.
It wouldn't make a difference for what instrument they try to use. You're getting back to the problems of a society. Our society has a problem. There is a cancer eating away at our youth. Our youth has such turmoil that they can't deal with, that our cities need to help deal with it, our schools need to help them deal with it, and our legislation is trying to help them deal with it. It gets back to that. We have to educate these people. We have to help these young people, and we have to start with the churches and the schools.
Let's go back to the phones. Caller, you're on the air.
Yes, ma'am. I really feel I agree with the gentleman in saying that it goes back to our community. I think as a whole, our community, our parents, our families, our schools need to come together as one. And if we have communication between the parents and the schools, we're able to educate the children and make them see where they're going wrong. But I really believe the parents need to be held accountable for what their children are doing, because when the parents are held accountable, they're more apt to pay attention to what their children are doing.
I see Phil Hamilton shaking his head.
Yeah.
You agree?
You know, one of the things that, again, from the incident with the 9-year-old, as a parent, we do have a responsibility for the actions of our children, and I think the legislature is going to begin to take a harder look at that. We've tended to treat children as children were 20 and 30 years ago, but society has changed, and I think we're going to see legislation to affect those changes.
Is the point, though, that society has changed? I mean, is it also taking a look at why society has changed? I mean, that's got to be part of it?
When you talk about parents, when I grew up, I always knew that my mother was at home. If I had a problem at school or got sick at school, or when I got home at 3 in the afternoon, my mother was there to greet me. Our society today, it takes both parents working, and so we have the problem of the latchkey children, children raising themselves, and you know, when you have that situation, I just think the potential for problems is there, and I think we're seeing that now.
Anybody have a suggestion how to accomplish these wonders? How to return to the more basic values? Anybody have an idea?
You've got cities that are spending so much tremendous of the amounts of their tax dollars on projects that aren't being successful. I hate to say that this waterfront downtown thing in Norfolk has cost millions and millions of dollars. I would love to see a small percentage of that go into the education of these kids in school. Go into teaching them something about firearms and the dangers of these firearms. Go back to teaching some of the moral problem that we have. And use some of that money, instead of building more and more, let's take care of what we've got first. Let's take care of some of these problems that we have at home with these kids today.
Okay, let's go back to the phone quickly and take another call. Caller, go ahead, you're on the air.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to say that people who have guns, like people at home, parents, whatnot, I think there should be stiffer penalties for those as well. These kids are getting guns from that home. Parents should upbeat, keep their guns under lock and key, inform their children. I'm aware of Mr. Hess's gun shop. A lot of kids in Norfolk are breaking into places whom have guns, such as gun shops, pawn shops. Let's keep these places, up to par. Myself being 20 years old, have been in trouble with the law before. It does appear to be easier for me to get a gun than somebody who has never been in trouble with the law. I don't understand why that is so.
Mr. Hess?
Because criminals don't go by the laws. Criminals don't obey our laws. Criminals take these firearms from other people's homes. They break in, they do rob, they do steal. My gun shop, knock on wood, has had 8 attempts and none successful. I'm very proud of that, and I try my darndest to keep it that way. I don't want illegitimate, illegal, any type of firearm in the street that is not proper. I don't agree with these ones that are being sold on the street, but there's no real way to stop that cancer in our society.
Let me bring up a question that you hear quite often. Let's not say guns in general, but let's just say guns with no other purpose but killing people. I'm talking assault rifles, AK-47s, M16s, AR-15s. Those are the guns that seem designed for one purpose, not hunting, certainly not home protection, but close-in fighting, MAC-10s, all the small, rapid-fire, semi-automatic pistols. A lot of people have trouble understanding why those guns are defended so strongly by the NRA and by gun supporters, because their only purpose seems to be to kill human beings. How would you respond to something like that?
It's the lack of knowledge of what that product was really designed for. A lot of the military weapons that are designed with that quote idea to kill are not designed to kill, they're designed to wound. And that's exactly what they're made for. Not every firearm is made to kill. If you look at product knowledge and product advancement in manufacturing of an item, they are used primarily as those advancements to make the sporting firearms of better quality. And they are of better quality. Most of your sporting firearms for hunting deer or bear or rhinoceros are much more powerful than a military weapon. Much more powerful than a military weapon.
But the problem is not so much with the automatic assault rifles and that kind of weapon. The problem is basically with handguns. And that's where your street violence and the weapons of choice are, the automatic pistols, semi-automatic handguns, easily concealed and with tremendous firepower and magazines to kill people.
We'll be back with more discussion in just a second. We have to insert another look at another problem here.
That's right. We'll take a look at some of the things that they're trying to do to combat some of this. Some people might say we're losing a generation of what was once considered our future, our children.
But while that violence continues, there are groups fighting desperately to make a difference.
And there's a woman at Allenton Elementary School in Virginia Beach who started a program that she hopes will catch on all across the country.
At night I can't sleep, I toss and turn, candlesticks in the dark, visions of bodies being burned. 4 walls closing in, getting bigger, I'm paranoid sleeping with
he was walking down the street and he got mugged. And he was giving the man his wallet and he just said no. And the man just said no and shot him.
She was living in an apartment and someone broke in her house and shot her mom.
At a party, one other guy got mad and shot him in the nose.
When I awake, I hear a car burning rubber.
It's a sad reality when young people can talk about crime as easily as they talk about their favorite toy. But there's one group that's learning at the earliest ages possible that it doesn't have to be this way.
I am somebody. I will study hard. I will read more. I will improve my test scores because I am somebody.
These young men are members of the Black Male Cultural Image Club at Allenton Elementary School in Virginia Beach.
This club is about to make young black men like us positive role models and so we can be responsible in the future.
I like the way I've seen you walk in the hallways.
We as a black race must stop giving lip service to these causes and do something.
And 2 years ago, she did. The club is the brainchild of this woman, Rosa Edwards, who got tired of watching young people die at the hands of their friends. They are 6 to 13 years old, but their visions by far exceed their ages.
They keep us off the streets and make us stop robbing banks and make sure we're not out there being homeless and make sure we get the best education possible.
Learning is only limited by your attitude, not by your ability. Don't let anyone tell you you're dumb, that you can't learn, because you can.
Until the next club meeting, I wish you peace, love, and happiness be with you.
Well, it's tough enough on the streets, the peer pressure, the drugs, but how do our kids cope? Terry?
We have some young men and young women in the studio with us tonight who have to cope, and we thought we'd ask them for some of their experiences, just what it is like for those of us who don't go through that on a daily basis. So let's start down here. Tell me your name and just a little bit about what's it like. Do you feel that you're in danger? First of all, what's your name? Are you afraid out there sometimes? I mean, do you face violence every day?
Yeah.
What sorts of things?
People getting shot, shooting at you. There's certain places like you can't go because you know if you go there you get shot or something. You gotta watch where you go when you're walking down the street and stuff like that.
So what do you do to keep yourself safe? You just change the way you behave? I mean, what don't you do?
I just do my regular thing, you know. If you don't say nothing to nobody, most likely won't nobody say nothing to you. You just gotta, be chill.
Okay, let's go to our next guest here. What's your name?
Antoine Corporal.
Antoine, how about you? Do you know anybody that's been shot, that's been hurt?
Yeah, I know my friend named Gerald. His cousin shot him by mistake. They were playing with a sawed-off rifle, and it was loaded in the shot, and he almost died 3 times.
Is that right? How about you? I mean, when you go out on the street, when you go hang out with the guys, I mean, are there some things that you just don't do because they're dangerous, that you have to watch out for?
Yeah, I don't, with my friends, sometimes they like to talk stuff to people they don't know. I just be quiet because it's not right. Because you don't know what they got on. They can have a gun and you can't dodge a bullet. And if they're shooting at one person, they can hit you because bullets don't got no name. You just go somewhere and just hit another person.
I mean, you've ever been around when there was gunfire going down?
Yeah, at a party one time, coming out, and they started shooting, and everybody started running.
Does this bother you? I mean, would you rather live some other way than have to put up with this every day?
Yes, I will. Yes, I would.
You hope to?
Yes.
I hope you do too. Let's go on to our next guest down here. What's your name, first of all?
Anthony Irwin.
Anthony, how about you? I'll ask the obvious questions. I mean, how close have you come to being hurt or being involved in kind of street violence?
Well, me personally, I have not, but I'm here with some of these fellows here from the WW Houston Boys and Girls Club. And what I would like to say, though, is that, speaking on a more positive note, if we're going to do something about this, just like the delegate from Newport News, Mr. Harrison, said, that we need to look at it from a societal point of view. And if we're looking at it, and I think it's unfortunate we are looking at it from the problem of the inner city, but if we're looking at it from that particular point of view, what we have to look at is, yes, maybe we need some assistance from money, but more than that, what we have to do as a society is begin to say, hey, this is it, we're stopping it. And then we have to look at what's the common thread. 10, 12 years ago, we didn't have the same type of problem we're having with guns, but what has come in with guns? Drugs. That's the common thread. Now, when the society, as a society, we say we don't want drugs anymore, then we'll start seeing the demand for the drugs to go away and the demand for the guns to go away.
Now, you're doing something about this, though. What kind of stuff do you do with these kids?
Well, we have rap sessions many times. We have role-playing situations. We try to do positive programming. Just this evening, we finished a pilot session of our job search program. So we try to provide hope in the Boys and Girls Club at WW Houston and for the Boys and Girls Club of South Hampton Roads.
Okay, and we have here Milton Reed, who is with the Campostella Boys and Girls Club. You're trying to do the same thing, I would presume.
Yes, sir. The delegates and the political officials, they touched around with the area, but basically you have to begin to address the mindset of the children. That's where the core problem is. It's not in gun control, it's in addressing how do we choose to live our lives. We deal with kids that come from Diggstown and that come from Oak Leaf Forest. And these kids tell me in numerous rap sessions, in a lot of cases, we carry guns because we want a reputation. And what that's telling me is that they want some identity. That means the school system, the churches, and the family needs to begin to re-educate in terms of identity. What is it to be a man? What is it to be a woman? And deal with those basic issues, okay? Everything that was said before, in my opinion, was symptomatic, and you can't deal with the problem without dealing with the core root of it.
And you give them an alternate way of being a man, alternate way of being a woman.
Through re-education, you must learn to redefine their roles. Children learn what is a man and what is a woman based upon what they see and what they're taught. So when they come to the Boys and Girls Club, we try to give them an alternate definition of what is considered manhood. Manhood does not have to be, I've killed someone. Manhood can be, we've talked and we've worked this out. This is a better way to go at it.
Okay, we're going to break here for just a second. I think we're going back to Alveda.
Thanks a lot, Terry. We also want to hear from you out there, the kids, the parents. We want to find out how you feel about it. Give us a call. Coming up next, though, do moving cameras make the violence worse? Well, the media under the gun. We'll tackle that issue next. When the riots broke out in Los Angeles, the world watched violence unfold on the television screen, and many may argue that we are the population that mimics what we do. So, does violence breed violence? Well, Carolyn Anderson put that question to the experts.
Violence on the big screen. Violence in the real world. But does all this violence on TV and in the movies lead to crime on the streets?
The media are only a contributing cause to violence in our society. They are never can be a direct cause of violence in our society, and the research has indicated that.
Research also has to separate the influence of fantasy and reality.
Well, I like violent films just like anyone else, but it kind of like, I don't know, it gives you ideas on how to commit certain new types of violence.
How much influence does the media play?
I think it plays a great deal because a lot of these young people are bored to death.
Then you got to wonder about cartoons. I mean, there's nobody more violent than Woody Woodpecker, but maybe it just desensitizes people to violence.
Then there's the news. The coverage of the LA riots brought on criticism from all sides around the country. But a Virginia Beach counselor who works with criminals says this has to be put in perspective. Watching the riots didn't cause people to riot, but those with problems to begin with may have been influenced by the live coverage.
A lot of people exposed to the LA riots didn't riot, but those people who already had a lack of control in their lives, these people were most likely the people that got involved in the riots.
Surprisingly, a local police chief defends TV news for covering what really happens when violence takes over.
Showing the reality of what it does. The person that has been killed, or the family that is affected by the killing.
Almost everyone we talked with believes the media has some influence on street crime. But what comes out of this television news control room can only reflect what comes out of the community. So the question is, do you blame what's on television or the society that put it there? Carolyn Anderson, WAVY News 10.
And long about 24 years ago, when I was an undergraduate in college, we were arguing that very same point. What effect does violence on television have? What effect does violence in movies have? We're still arguing it. We'll probably be arguing it in another quarter of a century. What do you think? What do you think about media and violence? What's the relationship? First of all, what's your name?
Bill Liddell.
Bill, what's the relationship here? What do you think?
As per the news media, I don't think there's much we can do. I mean, we do have the First Amendment in place, and I don't think we want to mess with that. However, I think when it comes to the movies and television, I think we've gotten to where violence is commonplace. When people sit and watch through murder after murder on television, it can't help but inure them to the violence. When I was growing up, Roy Rogers, I can't remember that he ever killed anybody. And in fact, I can't even remember that he actually hit anybody when he shot at them. Now you sit on TV and there's blood and there's gore every night, hours of it, and we call that, prime time.
And action-adventure movies, in the movies were exotic weapons chopping up people in more exotic ways every time. How about you? What's your name, sir?
Tom Terrell. I'm from Norfolk. I think that the gentleman from the Boys and Girls Club really got to the soul of the issue when they talked about attitudes. There have been violent films for some time. They're more violent now, but they've been around. There have been violence in schools for some time. When I went to junior high, I had to deal with violent gangs too. It has escalated, but it's a difference in degree, not in kind. And I think that if we get people to feel that they are worth something for some reason other than having the power to harm someone, that's a step in the right direction. Inner city children are frequently out of control of their situation, as well are other children. And that lack of control leads to this type of behavior.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We have some new panelists on our panel, and let's go back to Alveda to meet them.
Well, Terry, we do have Bill McIntyre, who has just joined us from the National Rifle Association, also with us. How do you feel about the media? Do you feel that we actually incite violence while reporting this sort of thing?
Well, whether or not there's a causal relationship between the violence we see on TV or in the movies and the violence we experience in terms of crime rates and homicide rates, I think is a debate that will go on. But there is no question that there is an adjustment that needs to be made in the way this kind of violence is portrayed. Every day we get a daily diet of glorified and exploitative bloodshed, whether it's through the news or through Hollywood or through the movies or what have you. And by the same token, many in the prestige press will wring their hands over the endemic violence within this country. And the two aren't meeting. There has to be responsibility. I'm just not the one to say where that responsibility is drawn. But again, there has to be responsibility that is on the person who pulls the trigger, because ultimately they are the ones who are responsible. But when it comes to gun control laws and such, we have to look at the motivations for these people who are picking up the gun and using it for crime before we look at the objects themselves. It is the motivation that we can correct, then we can see a reduction in our crime rates.
All right, we've got some callers too. Caller, your question please, or your comment.
Yeah, I had a question. What I like to know is I hear about what society should do on guns. Okay, now the training, what can we do now? I mean, laws got to be in existence, but as a society, 10, 20 years ago, we were more like neighbors. We stuck together and we can combat people carrying guns on the street or drugs. Nowadays, people, they're not together because basically they don't know what to do. What do you do as a society to help that?
The question is, how do we come together?
Well, the basic way we come together is that we have to build institutions to recorrect those behaviors. Criminality, violence, anytime you use a gun, you're still talking about a behavior that starts in someone's mind and ends up doing a particular task. Mm-hmm. So the question is, how do we build those institutions that can institute the correct usage of guns, the correct usage or the correct way to deal with conflict resolution? That's what needs to be done. People don't know how to talk anymore. And the main reason why, in my opinion, is because the society as a whole alienates you and teaches you to be an individual. So there's no way we can ever come together until those issues are addressed. I mean, we really have to deal with some fundamental issues here.
Okay, Anthony?
Well, I'd just like to echo what Milton said. It's a situation that until we as a society make it our primary focus, that we are going to begin to be more familiar, back to the old-fashioned values, we are never going to begin to address the situation. Until that is done, yes, guns, drugs, violence, they are going to be a part of society. But there is hope, and other particular other park situations, housing developments in Washington, D.C. lets us know that it can be done. There are parks just in our backyard in Norfolk. As a matter of fact, where he works, Oakley Forest, tremendous change. Why? Because the people in that particular situation said, hey, we want a difference, we want a change.
Well, they say they want a difference, they want a change. What are we actually doing in communities like that? And what are we doing to make that change?
Well, I can only speak, from my perspective. One thing that we're trying to do is give kids an alternative in terms of activities. I think the logo or the slogan for our club used to be the club that beats the streets. Now it's a positive place for kids. So what we're trying to do is create a recreational environment so we can channel the aggression out of children. And then when they hit the streets, maybe that will reduce their ability to get angry as quickly and then go into those violent types of behaviors.
Okay, we have to take a break right here, but when we come back, making a difference. We'll continue our discussion of violence in Hampton Roads after this. Welcome back. If you've been with us for the past 50 minutes or so, you've heard a lot of good ideas for what can be done to stop the violence.
But obviously they're not all really going to work. We've invited some of our panelists back to be with us for just a few brief moments here for the last time to quickly tell us where they think the answers might lie. We're going to start with Mr. McIntyre from the NRA, who joined us late. Obviously you don't feel gun control is the answer, but what do we do to stop the violence in our society?
Well, when it comes to the idea of kids and guns, I think it's best if we reflect on a proverb, and that is, it takes an entire community to educate one child. And I believe that's true, and I believe it reinforces the idea that it is through education that we can begin to tear down the motivations that lead kids to violent activities. I've seen all the studies and all the causal relationships that have been out there, and basically what we've been able to identify is that gun violence and drug trafficking is all a byproduct of gang affiliation and gang activity. And those kinds of relationships and bonds are made because there's a failure in the family structure and there's a failure in the community. Those kinds of failures can be redressed through an assortment of programs that the NRA has, but we can't do it alone. We draw on the good ideas and the brain trust of an entire community to bring these kinds of positive messages to light and help save what is currently and perhaps a lost generation.
Okay, Bill, thank you.
Dick Parise.
I think something like 95% of Americans feel like we need tighter gun laws. Even 87% of gun owners believe that we need a waiting period so that people in a state of anger can't go out, buy a gun, and go out and shoot somebody. The fact is that we are no different from any other country. The reason for having the lax gun laws that we have is that there are not enough men in the legislation like these two gentlemen who are willing to stand up and be counted and do what their constituents want them to do. Pass tough gun laws that make it difficult to buy a gun, that make it difficult to buy multiple guns, and that will give us some safer streets eventually.
Okay, Dick, thank you very much. We're running out of time. Let's talk to these two gentlemen. Phil Hamilton from Newport News, delegate.
Terry, as I've kind of emphasized throughout this program, it's a major problem that's got to be solved in a comprehensive manner by all of society. As an elected official, I feel a responsibility to take a leadership role, to bring this problem to the forefront so that the community can work together to resolve it. I think the gentleman from the Boys Club that were here hit it right on the head with this. And it's good to see a community that's willing to jump out and start to take an active role.
Thank you, sir.
Delegate Robinson.
There is no single answer to this problem, just as it developed over time. In the short term, I think that Dick Parise and some of us who want to do something about curbing the connection between guns and drugs, we've got to do something legislatively on that. But Long term, again, drawing on what the young men from the youth club had to say, we have got to look at reestablishing family, doing away and scrapping this archaic welfare system which disintegrates families. It's a disincentive for people to help themselves. Give people incentives, give them assistance, education, self-esteem, hope. Those are the long-term solutions, but the streets have got to be made safer in the short term.
Okay.
Delegate, thank you very much.
That's all the time we have, actually. Thank you all for joining us tonight.
And we want to thank all of you out there for joining us.
We also want to thank everybody for making this possible.
And we want to lead tonight with a sad and tragic look at violence in Hampton Roads. Thanks for joining us.
Goodbye.
It's getting worse. You hear gunshots every night.
We are not happy with this particular record, and we will not be satisfied with the continued increase in the number of homicides.
Drug and alcohol abuse was the reason for more than half of the murders.
So many homicides are domestic violence that trying to prevent them is really something beyond the capability of the police department.